Picking quilting designs to enhance the blocks of your pattern is easier than you might think. Hey everybody, it's me, Angela Walters from quiltingismytherapy.com, your favorite Midnight Quilter. And in this video, I'm going to share some tips and ideas for picking out quilting designs for blocks of your quilt. In a previous video, we made the home wall hanging, a quick and fun project that's a perfect gift for new homeowners or for yourself. And in that video, I showed you how to finish it using the quilt as you go method. Using the quilt as you go method is great for smaller projects or for people that don't love free motion quilting. But in this video, we're skipping the quilt as you go method and going right into the free motion quilting. I'm going to show you a little bit of my process for picking out quilting designs. We're going to learn how to use echoing to show off the blocks and pick out designs that are perfect for the background area. So whether you're a brand new machine quilter looking to dip your toes into FMQ world or an experienced machine quilter looking for some design inspiration, this video is for you. And if you want to quilt along with me on the home wall hanging, you can get the kit or the pattern on my website. All you have to do is click the link in the description box below. Well, let me grab my sewing machine so we can get to it. So I have my quilt sandwich basted and ready to go. And for this wall hanging, I picked out two beautiful threads that coordinate with the fabrics. I've got a nice kind of light cream color that's going to look great on the background, and then this soft kind of blush color that's going to look great on the blocks. I love picking out thread colors that blend in with the fabric so you see the beautiful texture of the quilting. But since I'm filming the quilting, I'm using a slightly darker color so you can see what I'm doing. When I'm looking at a quilt top and picking out designs for it, the first thing I ask myself is what is the most important thing about the quilt and how can I use the quilting to highlight that? For this particular wall hanging, I think the pattern is the most important thing. I love how the blocks spell out home, it just looks gorgeous. So I'm going to use the quilting to highlight the blocks. And to do that, I'm going to use echoing. Echoing is a great way to draw attention to parts of your quilt. It's like putting a set of parentheses around a block or an area of the quilt, really kind of drawing attention to that particular part. And when it comes to echoing, you can echo inside the block and outside the block, and I'm actually going to do both. So I'm going to start by first echoing the inside of the block. Echoing is simply quilting the same shape a set distance away, and the spacing that you use for your echo lines just depends on your personal preference. I'm going to go with a 1/4 inch spacing because I can run the foot of the machine along the seam, giving me that nice 1/4 inch. But for a less dense option, you can definitely spread that out. I'm using a ruler to help me keep those lines kind of nice and straight-ish. But if you don't have a ruler handy or you don't feel comfortable using it, you could definitely freehand this. And this doesn't have to be perfect. Just get it as close as you can, knowing that once you're finished and the whole thing is quilted, it's going to look gorgeous. So I'm echoing the inside of the outer part of the block. I mean, that's clear as mud, right? And I'm going to do the same thing on the inside of the inner part of the block. I'm going to use traveling around the edge to help me get to that point, and then quilt, and then simply echo the inside of the block. What I love about echoing is that for such a basic kind of shape, it really makes a huge impact on your quilt. Once I've echoed both sides of the block, I kind of have a choice to make. I can keep echoing inside the block until it's all filled in and it'll give it a nice geometric look, or I could quilt in this unquilted area with a different design altogether. A swirl, a meander, something nice and dense to really make those echo lines pop. And I think what I'm going to do is a wishbone design. What I love about wishbones is it fills the area this size perfectly, and it's actually not too tricky to wrap it around these corners. I'm quilting the wishbone design by quilting a line that angles towards the opposite side of the area. But once I approach that previously quilted echo line, I'm going to change directions by quilting a loop and going back up the other way. I like to think of this as quilting cursive L's since it kind of has that same basic shape. The most important thing though in quilting wishbones is I'm trying to keep these lines parallel to each other because that's going to help me progress through the area. And just like we saw with the echoing, you can change up the spacing between these lines to create a design that's more dense, or you can spread out those lines to quilt a design that's less dense. Again, it's really just kind of dependent on your preferences. Quilting wishbones along a straight area like this is one thing. Quilting it so that it wraps around a corner is a totally different thing. Basically, what I'm going to do is quilt my wishbones so that they pivot around an inner corner by quilting lines that go out and back to that same point. That's going to create a design that gets bigger on the outside, smaller on the inside, and helps me work my way in that new direction. So as I approach that inner corner, I'm just going to start quilting them so they come back to that point. Of course, it's going to look a little bit different because I'm turning that corner. I have more space on the outside than I do on the inside, but that's totally fine because that's how it's supposed to look. And then once I fill in that area, I can continue on quilting along the next straightaway, working my way from side to side and quilting those loops. And as I approach that next corner, I'm going to do the same thing, looking to that corner that I'm pivoting and quilting my wishbones so they go out and come back to that point. Now, if the thought of doing this seems a little too tricky, just hold on because I'm going to show you an alternative option to turning the corner with it. And once I'm finished, I have that nice echo line with that dense kind of wishbone on the inside. And just like I've already said, you can echo inside the block or outside. So I'm gonna echo outside the block as well. Not only is that gonna help highlight the block, it's gonna help separate it from the rest of the filler that I'm gonna put around it. But before I do the echoing, I'm gonna stitch in the ditch around the outside. Now this is totally optional. I just do this because I like how it looks. If this seems like too much work, you can totally leave it out. This might sound kind of weird, but I actually find stitching in the ditch kind of fun. I already have that seam to follow, so it's kind of nice and mindless, and all I have to do is try to keep it as close as I can. Once I'm ready to start echoing, I'm actually going to echo all the way around the outside of the block. Now since I'm right here and I want to start my echo line, I'm actually going to travel along this seam about 1/4 inch and then begin echoing. That seam's going to help kind of hide that little transition into the echoing, and it keeps me from having to start a new line of quilting, which I love. I'm quilting these echo lines in pink thread because it contrasts with the background and lets you see what I'm doing. However, if you're quilting your home wall hanging, I would go ahead and use a lighter cream in this area. I really like using matching thread colors because it makes the quilting subtle and lets you see the beautiful texture without overwhelming the piecing. And when I'm done, I have my beautiful block with some echoing inside and outside with that nice kind of filler inside of it. Now I'm going to quilt another block, and I'm going to show you a little trick for turning the corners with those wishbones. But just like we did with the previous block, I'm going to start with the echoing and then add my wishbones. Once I'm done echoing both sides, I'm going to start quilting my wishbones as normal, working my way down that straight portion. However, once I get to this corner, instead of quilting them so they turn around the corner, I'm going to instead quilt something different in this area so I don't have to deal with turning the corner. And what you put in here is totally up to you. You could add a swirl or a different design, or you can use some straight line quilting, basically anything to fill in that area so you can move on. Once I get to that inner corner, I know that it's time to throw in that other design and then continue on in the next direction. And just for fun, I'm going to throw a little swirl in this area. Now that that's filled in, I can go ahead and continue quilting my wishbones. If you don't like the look of that swirl, you could do something different. For instance, I could get to that inner corner and quilt some lines that curve out and fill in that area, coming back to that corner and then continuing on. This time I'm going to quilt a geometric wedge that fills in that corner. The main idea here is it doesn't matter what you put in that area, just make sure it's filled in and move on. Now I like to joke that once is a mistake, twice is a design choice. So it really doesn't matter what I put in these corners as long as I do something in all of the corners. That way it looks intentional even if it's not. And check it out, I still have that beautiful curvy look with the wishbone quilting, but instead of having to turn the corner, I just threw something else in the corners. I think it still looks beautiful, and as a bonus, it was easier to quilt. Now that I have that finished, I'm gonna do the same thing that I did on the other block by echoing around the outside. Now in this example, I'm kind of blocked in on the center. So after I echo in here, I'm gonna go ahead and add my filler while I'm there. I don't wanna have to worry about coming back and filling in that area because there's a good possibility that I'll forget. Now, of course, this is totally up to you. How you approach the quilting of a quilt is a personal preference. So if you wanna do all the blocks first and then come add all the filler, that's totally fine. If you wanna add the filler as you go, also totally fine. It's kind of like there's no wrong options when it comes to the quilting. And then once it's echoed, again, I can add that filler while I'm here, or I can come back and do it later. Now the filler is just the designs that we're using around the blocks. The most important thing when it comes to quilting that area is I want it all quilted as consistently as possible. Beyond that, you can quilt whatever kind of designs you want. Since the fabric already kind of has a floral inspiration, I'm gonna quilt some flowers in this area by quilting a small little curl and then quilting petals that wrap around it. And I can keep quilting those rows of petals until I'm happy with the size of the flower. But once I'm ready to branch off and quilt another one, I'm gonna pause and quilt my next little curl and quilt those same arcs that wrap around it. And I'm gonna keep on quilting those beautiful little flowers, filling in that area as much as possible. In a previous video tutorial, I show you how to quilt this design in detail, so if you wanna learn more about how to do that, just check it out. It's in the Free Motion Fillers Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along video series. In that series, I show you how to quilt all sorts of different designs, and you can find that video series on my YouTube channel. Now, one thing you should know about me is that as I'm quilting, I tend to get a little bored. I like to switch up the designs as I'm going because it keeps me engaged and I just find it a lot of fun. So after I quilt a couple flowers, I think I'm gonna throw in another design just to add a pop of texture. And since we're kind of already on that flower theme, I'm gonna go with some leafy kind of shapes. Then after quilting a couple of those, I can switch back to the flowers and kind of bounce back and forth between the two designs. And I know I've already said it before, but it's so important. The most important thing here is that I want to fill in that area as consistently as possible. So if I have any gaps in between my designs, I'm simply going to add more quilting or a totally different design to make sure I fill it in. I think people will notice a gap in the quilting before they notice an error. So as long as you quilt something in there, it's going to look great. And as you're quilting, if you find yourself stuck, just use traveling to get out of that area and continue on. And once you're done, you have that beautiful design with that lovely texture, adding a little pop of a different look with that leafy design. Now, if you like the idea of switching up between designs, just know that you can combine any designs. You could do swirls and flowers, you can do leaves and pebbles. It really is kind of like a choose your own quilting adventure. I just love how it keeps the quilting engaging and lets me play with a lot of different designs. Well, now that I'm finished with this one, I'm going to do the same thing in the remaining blocks. When it comes to echoing your blocks, you can be creative with the sides that you echo. For instance, as I'm looking at this H block, if I wanted, I could echo my way around all the sides, giving me that kind of unquilted area in the middle. But for a slightly different look or to really highlight the shape of the H, I'm actually going to echo the two sides of the block and then echo the middle block. Not only is that going to highlight that kind of H shape, but it's going to make it to where I don't have to worry about turning the corner and joining these areas right here. So as you're quilting through your quilt tops and using echoing inside your blocks, just remember that you can play around with the sides of the blocks that you're echoing. And just like I did with the O block, I'm gonna use this little seam right here to help get me to my outside echo so I can do that without starting a new line of quilting. Now, as I'm quilting my blocks with those echo lines on the inside and the outside, at any point I can stop and start doing my filler design. But just like I've already said, if that seems like too much to keep track of, you could do all the blocks first and then your filler, or switch it up like I'm doing. And just like I did in the center of the O block, I'm quilting that flowery kind of meander design and throwing in leaves every now and again. Usually when I'm quilting quilts with a border, I'll do a different design in that border area. I like how it kind of frames the quilt and kind of changes it up even more. But with this particular border, not only is the fabric a little bit on the busier side, it's kind of narrow, so there's not a lot of room to put much in there. So I'm going to treat that the same as the background area and just quilt my flowers and leaves right over it. I mean, my thought is if you can't see the quilting anyway, you might as well do something nice and easy. Now you can probably tell I like my quilting nice and dense, but if you want a softer, less dense look, all you have to do is spread out the spacing between your lines. Instead of quilting your lines a 1/4 inch apart, you could quilt them a 1/2 inch apart. I mean, like I've already said, it just really depends on your preferences and what you prefer. The hardest part about filling in around blocks with a different design is dealing with all the gaps that can appear in your quilting. Remember, as you're quilting, the most important thing is that the whole area is filled in as consistently as possible. So use echoing to fill in any of those gaps, use traveling if you find yourself stuck in a corner, but the most important thing is that you just keep on going. I promise, once you're done and you step back and look at the whole thing, all you're gonna see is that beautiful overall texture. When I'm working on a quilt, my favorite part is when I have all the designs figured out for the whole quilt. At that point, there's no more decisions about what I'm gonna put where. All I have to do is finish the quilt. So now that I have my plan, I'm gonna go ahead and do that, quilting the rest of my blocks and adding that filler around it. And once I'm finished with it, I'll show you what it looks like. And this beautiful home wall hanging is finished. It's so much fun quilting a smaller project because you can complete it so quickly. I love how the echoing really shows off the blocks of the wall hanging and helps separate them from the filler around it. And the flower meander design that we used in the background is the perfect way to bring in some of those details from the fabric itself. I just love how quilting doesn't have to be difficult to be impactful. By using simple echo lines, we're able to show off our quilt blocks and add a beautiful texture to the background area. But the important thing to remember is no matter what quilting designs you use for your quilts, the most important thing is that you get it finished. Whether that's an all-over design, using your walking foot, or even using the quilt as you go method. Because remember, it's not a quilt until it's quilted. So thank you so much for joining me on this video. I'll be back soon with another episode of the Midnight Quilter. Until then, everybody, happy quilting.